And so they're saying they're going to drop. I mean, I really don't know how this is going to turn out, because this is a nightmare for the dealerships and the manufacturers. There's going to be a huge financial penalty, but it just doesn't make sense. Not adding up at all.
It really does beggar the imagination, um, and it's the cart before the horse,
Mm-hmm.
restricting people's choice of what they can purchase. So you're interfering in the market before you've built out the infrastructure to actually support your policy. So
I'm
that's a whole other issue about these. Is there adequate public electric vehicle charging? I think the answer
Well,
is
one of the
no.
big stories over the last, well, several months, but it's of course, it's intensified at that point. We're talking about EV mandates, across the country, worse in province of British Columbia, more stringent in that. I thought, let's get on Barry Penner. He's the chair of Energy Futures Institute, but probably, well, just as importantly in this environment is he was a BC Attorney General and the Environment Minister in British Columbia when several new environmental policies were put in place. First of all, Barry, thanks for finding the time. And now, of course, you've been spending a lot of time on these EV mandates.
I sure have, including this morning, digging through some more details on this. There's a Leger poll out this morning looking at
Mm-hmm.
Canadian attitudes, and newsflash, Canadians by and large don't support the EV mandates.
Well, we better start with if people aren't up to speed on this. If they're not, what are those mandates, or the nutshell of those mandates?
Sure, at the federal level, which gets most of the attention, there's a requirement of 60% electric vehicle sales by 2030, rising to 100% by 2035, meaning in effect, we're going to ban the purchase of internal combustion vehicles. And that's everything from diesel pickup trucks to gas powered Honda Civics. Those vehicles are going to be verboten come 2035. And that interim target of 60% sounds aggressive until you look at what British Columbia's target is, which is 90% for the
Yeah.
2030 model year. And bring it a little closer to time, right now we're staring down a 2026 model year requirement in BC of 26% EV sales and a 20% federal mandate across the country. And we're nowhere near on track to meet those percentages in terms of new vehicle sales being electric.
And what's incredible is that the reality is there. We've had a tariff dispute. We have uncertainty in other areas. And they haven't budged on this. And I'm thinking, let's talk about next year. We're about halfway there. If you look at, oh, sorry, I've got to throw one more thing. So they're saying they want us to buy electric vehicles. And the
Correct.
way they have decided to do it is to cut the subsidies. It just seems to me one of many aspects of this. But I mean, it is, if it wasn't serious, it'd be laughable. Like you're saying, oh, I know, I want to encourage purchase, but we'll discourage. And it's been showing up in the numbers already. I mean, I looked at British Columbia under 10%, other parts of Canada 7.6%. Clearly the rebates, as they were supposed to, provide an incentive. They've taken them away, so less sales.
That's correct. The federal rebate program ran out of money kind of
Mm.
unexpectedly about late January of this year. It was thought it was going to continue to March 31st, presumably give time for the federal government to bring in another budget and authorize additional funds. Of course, chaos erupted. We didn't really have a properly functioning government this spring. You'll remember the previous prime minister resigned.
Yeah.
Parliament was essentially prorogued. So there was no ability to authorize more funding for these EV rebates. So it ran out of money. And then at the provincial level here in British Columbia, the government commissioned a poll last year that found that the number one obstacle for people purchasing an EV is the price, i.e., they can't afford it. And so what did they do a few months later? Well, in May, they eliminated the provincial rebate, even though they knew that the number one barrier for people purchasing them is the price. They got rid of something that would help people afford them.
And as you say, though, it starts next year. I mean, we're months away. The clock's ticking. And,
Well,
I talked to a couple of car dealers, and this is going to be a nightmare because they're the ones sort of on the hook. They've got to sell 20% of their sales have got to be EVs. And,
it's actually starting now, Mike,
mm,
because the 26 models are arriving
oh, of
now
course.
on dealers'
Mm,
lots. Not all of them, but there are starting to be 26 model year vehicles coming out, showing up on the lots. They typically come out about 6 months before the end of the calendar year. So the governments, federal and provincial, have told the
Hmm.
manufacturers, we are going to hold you responsible for the 26 model year vehicles, not calendar year. So this 20% requirement federally is being applied to those 26 models coming out right now. And in
Yes.
BC, it's a 26% requirement. And again, the BC government said, no, we're going to hold you accountable and possibly impose a $20,000 penalty per vehicle that
Yeah.
doesn't comply with this mandate.
Well, let me throw one more because I was looking at a report, the Canada Energy Regulator, that was the National Energy Board before, put out something this week that says they expect EV sales or zero emission vehicle regulated sales to drop next year. At a time when they need to rise or basically double, easy figure, but basically double.
Sure.
And so they're saying they're going to drop. I mean, I really don't know how this is going to turn out because this is a nightmare for the dealerships and the manufacturers. There's going to be a huge financial penalty, but it just doesn't make sense. Not adding up at all.
It really does beggar the imagination. Um, and it's the cart before the horse,
Mm-hmm.
restricting people's choice of what they can purchase. So you're interfering in the market before you've built out the infrastructure to actually support your policy. So
I'm
that's the whole
yeah.
other issue about these. Is there adequate public electric vehicle charging? I think the answer is no.
Well, I think that's a key point. I'm really glad you've brought it up because obviously there's two issues around that. Is what kills me is they put out this mandate and didn't have a plan for the charging infrastructure and the electrical grid. I mean, nothing's meaningful has been done, which makes it even worse. I mean, I think I can't figure out why that happened. I mean, is it that really that clueless? If you want to have this many vehicles, at least get the infrastructure rolling, and they haven't done it.
It makes me think that one part of government or in the utilities they really
Mm-hmm.
didn't believe
Oh,
governments
okay.
were serious about this. It's maybe the left hand and the right hand not talking to each other.
Yeah.
Because I think utilities are cautious, right? Obviously, about spending money that they may not get a return on. So if the demand didn't show up, they'd have these stranded assets and they'd have to carry that cost and pass it on
Mm-hmm.
to consumers, through the regulated process. So I think there's been this institutional delay, wondering, is this real? Are these mandates really going to hold? And will people actually purchase electric vehicles en masse to support the
Mm-hmm.
cost of billions and billions of dollars of required infrastructure? And I'm just talking in British Columbia. Now multiply that several fold across the country. And
Yeah.
the numbers are eye watering.
Well, I think we are literally talking, as you say, in the tens of billions of dollars for the infrastructure that should have started several years ago. So now the compound problem of availability, but it's also the electric grid. Are they ready? Can they support this in an era that also it's widely acknowledged and agreed that you need more energy if we're talking about the AI revolution? And we do have a minister federally of AI, I think. And so
Yes,
you think they talk to each other, or at least that's what I just find. I'm trying to think of polite words here, but clueless is the nicest thing I can say because we're talking about practical. So it's another, doesn't this sound great? And then the practicality didn't followed up. And these are just facts. It doesn't matter where you vote on the political spectrum. You need electricity for EVs. you know.
you're right. And so the governments here in British Columbia, they try to underplay it or downplay it and say, well, by 2030, it'll only represent a certain percentage increase on our demand. That's right, because the 90% requirement starts in 2030. And that's
Mm-hmm.
when you're going to see the big ramp up in electrical demand. By our calculations, just in British Columbia, to hit the targets or to support the EV targets, we'd need the equivalent of two more Site C dams. And we're
Wow.
just finishing the first one. $16 billion is the last estimate. I expect it to be more when the dust settles. So imagine building two more. And that's just to support electric vehicles by 2040.
Yeah.
And that might sound like a long way away, but it was 15 years ago that a certain premier, Gordon Campbell,
Mm-hmm.
announced we're going ahead with the Site C dam. So 15 years later, it's finally getting completed. So talking about 2040 really isn't that far away in electricity planning terms because that's about how long it takes you to build new major infrastructure in Canada.
And that's, people are starting to become more aware of that when we're talking in other areas, whether like we could decide to do a pipeline from Alberta into the West Coast again, but as people are getting, that doesn't happen overnight. There's a lot of, even with the federal government support, which is very questionable, I'll leave that aside, but it takes years. It takes years for the critical minerals, that we required. The list is a long one, and your point's well taken. We could all say yes, we could green light major energy infrastructure. It doesn't happen overnight, and yet the mandates start kicking in next year.
And the thing is, the public isn't maybe as unaware or uninformed as the governments might hope.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new Leger poll out today, Canada-wide, showing that 71% of Canadians agree with the statement that the current electric vehicle mandates are unrealistic.
Yes.
71% of Canadians get that it's just not real. But the policy makers have not yet picked up that memo.
Well, I was going to say the 74% say that, and the other 26% aren't paying attention because
Right.
this is just practicality. If you have an electric vehicle, you need to be able to charge it. Simple as that. And you need a power source, and you need a grid that can carry it. I mean, all of these things are just the reality of that mandate. And I guess my message or my point is, they've gone ahead with something that might sound good to a lot of people or some people, but they haven't done any of the follow through that'll make this a reality. And again, now I'm starting to worry back against the businesses. Again, if I'm a dealer, I'm a manufacturer, this is worrisome.
Sure. The just think of the dealers that were caught in the bind. They were
Yeah.
negotiating a purchase price with customers in January on a Friday. You can count on this $5,000 federal rebate
Yes.
that'll come right off the price. The buyer walks in Monday morning to pick up their vehicle, and the dealer says, "I need another $5,000 from you."
Yeah.
What? Because on Sunday the federal program ran out of money.
Wow.
That
Yeah.
is what happened, Mike. And the dealers were on the receiving end of a lot of hostile consumers. Said, what happened? Well, it's not the dealer's fault. They were
No.
not like it. The federal government couldn't even seem to see that the money was running out. I don't understand how they couldn't anticipate this. In fact, just a few days before, they said, we think we have several weeks. And then it was out within 2 days.
Yeah.
So it does bring in a question of managerial competence when things like that happen. And one other thing on the charging thing, it does work for some people. Like obviously, people are driving electric vehicles. I have a plug-in hybrid because I like to hedge my bets. I like to have energy options so I can operate most of the day on electric only.
Mm-hmm.
But I can easily charge just at home with a wall charger. I don't have to upgrade my electrical service. But if you're trying to go longer distances and you don't have a gas backup like I do with my plug-in hybrid, so for longer distances, the gasoline engine kicks in. If you don't have that, you have to upgrade your electrical service at home. And not everybody lives in a single detached home.
Yes.
40% of, at least in British Columbia, people live in multi-family homes and aging apartment buildings that simply don't have enough electrical capacity for everyone to charge their electric vehicle at a high rate overnight so they're ready to go the next morning. These are the kind of really challenging infrastructure issues to bring upgraded electrical service to thousands and thousands and thousands of aging apartment buildings if we're going to tell people now you must drive an electric vehicle. Because if you can't charge at home, it
Mm-hmm.
changes the experience dramatically in terms of convenience and cost. I was speaking to someone last week who has been enjoying their Tesla Model 3 for 5 years. They said, Barry, if I have to charge on the road at a Tesla supercharger, I'm paying up to 49 cents per kilowatt hour compared to my at home rate of 11 and a half cents.
Wow.
So they're paying what? You do the math. I think that's 3 times more, 3.5 times more, 350% more if they have to pay at a Tesla supercharger station than if they can charge at home. So it changes the cost equation about whether you're going to really save money on the fuel that you're using in your EV if you can't charge at home.
Well, again, it reminds us, so there's the individuals and then the business, and we'll just finish with this, is that they're not going to make these targets. That they're not going to be reached. So that looks the dealership, let alone some of the strategy of the manufacturers, but the dealership is going to pay a price. They're either going to have to reduce the overall number of sales, meaning I'm going to sell 100 EVs. It's going to be 20% or 90% in BC, as you said, 60% across the country. So I might just reduce the number of total sales to get that percentage. It's not a good way of going about it, but or pay a big penalty.
Right. Or the one other option is to
Yeah,
pay a competitor who might have excess electric vehicle credits that sells more than the required percentage.
good point.
And right now, there's only one dominant player in that position, and it's called Tesla.
Yeah,
CEO is Elon Musk. And again, I thought we were talking about elbows up, but we actually have a public policy in Canada that will be directing money to
yeah,
Tesla and to Elon Musk at a
yeah.
time when we were talking about elbows up. Again, there's a
Well,
lot of things that just don't line up here.
absolutely. That's my impression. A lot of things that don't make sense. Barry, thanks for helping it make sense to us here. And I'm sure you're busy as chair of the Energy Futures Institute. Much stuff to do. Appreciate you finding time.
Great to be with you, Mike.